Tuju, Nindinoy Magnadu, Indigenous Shinabedu, Basic Niganigabo, and Indigenous Cast. Ninoa, Nagani Bitu, Minwenda, Ma, Wabuminigop Nungo, Squad me is Agi Ganik, Nindonjuba, Makwa, Nindunde. My name is Floyd Jourdain. I'm from Red Lake. I'm a Bear Clan member. And here today, it's really good to see everybody here. This is a nice, intimate group here. I kind of like that. Just that 1,000 people. Yeah. But miigwech and welcome. It's good to see you all here. Many times ago, there was a people. They lived by this beautiful body of water. The water was so clear, you could just see the minnows swimming around in there, and it was beautiful. Binagamin is what they called it. And they lived there for a long time. They had arrived at this point by displacing another indigenous group. And they raised their families, they hunted. There was an abundance of game, fish, wildlife, wild rice, everything that they needed was there. It was beautiful, it was paradise. And one day they were visited by another group of people who came with a message. They said, we're coming into this area. And prior to that, they had known of one another. Sometimes they traded, they borrowed, and they shared each other's hunting grounds, but not in the numbers that they described that were coming. They said, and we're coming, and our message to you is that we were sent here to ask if we could coexist here with you. We want to live here. We want to share in the resources. We want to share and live here amongst you. And so the people who live by this lake, they thought about it and they said, well, we can't give you an answer right now. We have to deliberate and talk amongst ourselves, our elders, and our people. So the visitors, they left. And they returned, and when they did return, the people who lived by the lake, they said, we can't grant your wishes. There's too many of you. And we don't have enough resources, we don't feel. And our dead are buried here. We live here, we're in harmony. And so our answer, unfortunately, will be no. And so the travelers, they left and they went back east. And they reported back to their people, and they said, well, they said, no, we can't live there. And they accepted it. But it was the younger ones who would not accept it. And they said, no, we don't accept that. And so they started to wage attacks on the people who lived by the lake. And this went on for some time, until ultimately it resulted in all-out war. So these two great nations, they faced off, and they had conflict, and it lasted for quite some time. Many, many people lost their lives, young people, and they fought until there was a time when the Creator arrived. He saw the bloodshed, and he saw the war and the fighting and the heartbreak and the despair. And he appeared on the western portion of this body of water. And he said, I don't want people to do this to each other anymore. And he said, this has to stop. And so the visitors by the lake were instructed, along with the people who lived there, to travel south to a place where this red stone wasn't underneath the earth. And they were supposed to travel. And when they get there, they were supposed to retrieve the red stone that was there and bring it back. And they were to fashion Ojibwe pipes. And they were supposed to exchange them. And along with those pipes that came, there was also sounds that belonged to it. And they were supposed to, from that point on, they were supposed to never have a war again. And it didn't end there. There was some skirmishes afterwards. But as the result of the bloodshed that happened there, the people who lived at the lake over time were driven west and south. And then the new ones came. And so from that point on, there was a lot of grief, there was a lot of trauma, a lot of lives lost. And when they pulled the young men from the water, there was blood stains in the water, and there was blood stains on the beach. But the Creator said, if you use these sacred items, they're going to help you to heal. Over time, your pain will cease. And from this point on, it's going to take several generations for this to happen. But there will be peace from this time on. These two nations will never have a war again. And so that story talks about where I'm from. My name is Ojibwe, so I grew up in Ojibwe. The clear waters from that point on were called Red Lake. There's a reference to the blood that was spilled on the shores and in the water of the Red Lake. And the story I'm telling you about is our relationship with the Dakota Sioux. The Dakota Sioux traveled and they occupied these areas here. But over time, there was even people prior to them who lived in this area. The Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara tribes, they lived in this area at one point. And the Dakota Sioux, in conflict with them, drove them west. So that when the great Ojibwe nation moved from the eastern seaboard, following our traditional prophecies, to travel to the place where food grows on the water. We're talking about our sacred Manoman. You see a young girl back there in that image who was gathering the sacred Manoman wild rice. And so we had several stopping points as we traveled this way. And we ended up in this particular area. Like right around Wisconsin, and then some of them spread out from there. I know Red Lake, we went around the top part of the Great Lakes and come down. So a lot of our relatives are this imaginary line, which is called the First Nations of Canada, the international border. We never had such a thing. So they have brothers and sisters there. They're my same clan. Relatives that we used to go see all the time. Now we can't see them because of Homeland Security and all this kind of stuff that goes on. Someone got a DUI, so they can't go to Canada anymore. So there's a lot of things that happened over time that grew around us as Anishinaabe people. But in Red Lake, this is the area I'm talking about where the people lived. And then these are the battle points here. And then the Dakota Sioux, we're tied with the Dakota Sioux. Over time with our teachings, they gifted the Ojibwe people with gifts as well. The big drum and a lot of other gifts that we share collectively. Now we intermarried. I have family in Sistenwalk and Sioux Trek. I have relatives who go back and forth all the time. So over time, things did heal. Some of those old animosities unfortunately exist with some people who don't fully understand the history of it or the spiritual part of it. But over time we were bonded. So as people moved from the eastern seaboard, seeking lands, Indian lands, resources, water, a lot of the Indian nations were buffered up against one another. And we clung to each other and we tried to have relationships with each other to help each other. But we were overpowered and there was too many of them. I remember watching the movie Dances with Wolves, and people think, well, that's such a Hollywoodish version of American history, and some people love it. I like the movie. There's one particular scene in there where this old man is sitting in a teepee with all of these people, and he pulls out a blanket and he opens it up and he pulls out a Spaniard's helmet. And he said, this is from a long time ago. He said, our elders then told us they would come like the stars. So many of them, that there would come a time when we would no longer be able to fight them. So we have to pray and accept the Creator's wishes as we move forward. So with treaties, they were coming after everything. And our treaty at Red Lake is called the 1863 Old Crossing Treaty. Now, our tribe existed before there was a state of Minnesota. The Ojibwe people were here before there was the United States of America. And so being pragmatist, I think, is the way, by utilizing their prayer and our clan systems, everybody had something that they contributed to decision making. Everybody had a strength. Everybody, the women, the men. There was not a patriarchal society where the women were subservient to the men. The women were also very influential and spiritual and had something to contribute to our decision making, and our leaders relied on the women. And so our clan system is a beautiful system that operated for thousands of years, that there's no way you could really operate one without the other. So in the book Warrior Nation, which I'll talk a little bit about later on, in our research, we found out that the clan, the Kingfisher, actually came from a Dakota clan. And that's the reason why there's no Kingfishers anywhere else in Ojibwe country, because we had that conflict. And there was a young boy that was captured by the Ojibwe people at Red Lake. But in the spiritual sense, they recognized his spirituality. And he became part of our tribe, and he had a Kingfisher clan, so they adopted him. And so you see that little bird way on the right side, that's the Kingfisher. And the reason why the book was called Warrior Nation is because some of the clans, say for instance, almost like a prearranged marriage. When you're born, according to your clan, it almost set the direction of your life. So Makwa, that's Makwa right there, that black bear. Over time, you learn these things listening to elders. And so the Red Lake, we didn't have a lot of those leadership clans. We didn't have like the Crane. They were present, but when the Ojibwe moved west, a lot of the warrior clans were at the front. The Martin clan, Bear clan. Well, those were clans that had the characteristics of special forces, if you will. They were soldiers. They were great strategists. The Bear people knew the terrain and the climate, and they knew how to work cooperatively to be able to protect everybody. So one of my mentors, his name was Jourdain, Stilldays, passed away. His theory was that's one of the reasons why we have so many problems is because there's so many Bear Clan people on this western edge of the Ojibwe Nation. We span all the way from Michigan all the way out to Montana and into Ontario. They said because it was all of the warrior clans were first as we moved west. Then over time, like with Red Lake, once we settled, that's primarily what there was these warrior clans. Anybody ever knows the animal fisher and a marten? Little bitty cute little cuddly animal. But you don't want to mess with it because they take on animals that are 4 or 5 times their size. They're temperamental. They're very, very sharp and intelligent. And so the Anishinaabe modeled themselves by watching animals. You know, if an animal can eat it, you can eat it. Watch what they do. And in Red Lake, the eagle is highly revered all over in Indian country. The eagle is one of the ones that everybody listens to, because that's our messenger, that's our brother. And there's stories that go with that are too lengthy for me. And there's elders that can talk about those things in a different context, but in the context of treaties, trying to give a Indigenous worldview of how we approach treaties. Like I said, pragmatist. 1863, over by a little small place called Huat, Minnesota, by Red Lake Falls. The Red Lake and Pembina bands were called there. The state of Minnesota and Alexander Ramsey and all of the influentials were looking to open up territories. They came there, but they presented it as a peace treaty. And we weren't at war with the United States government or the state of Minnesota. But Red Lake was also very aware what had happened just recently, a few months earlier, to the Dakota Sioux, were hanged at Mankato, and there was a lot of scary things happening with Indian people. And nowadays, tribal governments deal with corporate issues and bottom lines and economic development and housing and all those kind of things. Every now and then you'll have some terrible things that happen on Indian reservations. But the leaders then were at direct threat of being decimated and wiped off the face of the earth if we did not comply. So in 1863, Red Lake for over about 2 weeks negotiated with the federal government, with the military present, at 11 million acres. And you look at the 5 cents an acre. Who would even fathom such a thing? But they were also very aware that if we don't give them something, they're not going away. They're not going to go away. It was very frustrating because with Indian people, they'd say, well, we need to talk about this. And then they leave and they're gone for half a day. you have all these people sitting around, where are these Indians at? Jeez, what's the deal here? The concept of time. But when they went away, that's what they would do. They would pray, and they would deliberate, not only amongst themselves as being the male figures, but with everybody. They had to have, that's just the way our systems worked. And so, although that's not our official treaty day at Red Lake, which is July 6th, 1889 is the allotment, is when we, over time, our land base eroded. And then in 1889 is when our big treaty, it's called the 1889 Treaty. Dawes General Allotment Act, we rejected allotment. There again, it was just out of necessity. But the relentless efforts, it did not stop. And to this day, I think why treaties matters is where we're going with all this. So I wanted to share just a little bit about my reservation and this origin, because that's where it all starts. They say, "Akoe asema." Very first thing is tobacco. That's the very first, that's our first medicine. So if you're going to talk about your people or your reservation, and you're going to be asking all of our spirits and people like that who are still relevant and still watch us, we got to offer tobacco first. And then you can talk about other things, and then they will give you the words to be able to relay what it's supposed to be. I was telling Pete to print out all this stuff, and 3 pages of notes, and then I get over here and I open my bag there and no notes. I guess I'm not supposed to use the notes. Hey, let's set up a PowerPoint. I got a PowerPoint on my laptop. I don't know how much of that will be relevant to this discussion, but just about the exhibit itself. I know several years ago I was in tribal government for Red Lake, and brings back a lot of memories actually to see this. I know the tribal leaders and tribes working with the state of Minnesota and Minnesota Historical Society, and a lot of people contributed to the exhibit here, which is a beautiful exhibit. It's traveled all over, and I was fortunate to be in tribal government at the time and to be a part of it, because not only for the education and citizens of Minnesota, but for our own people. Because in our school systems, very little on treaties, very little on history. Of course, we have the standard history books that are basically void of, they'll never talk about Ojibwe and about our relationship with very little about our relationship with our brothers and sisters from the Dakota Sioux tribe. But it's a start. So one of the things that came out of this was our history at Red Lake. We figured we need to put together something. And for students, for teachers, for visitors of the reservation. And so that's how Warrior Nation came about, as the book that was written by Anton Troyer. And for a number of reasons, Anton was a fluent speaker. He understood the language, and he knew a lot of the elders. He attended ceremonies on a reservation. And because Warrior Nation chronologically covered leadership all the way back from our traditional clans to the advent of modern constitutions, different Indian policies that eroded tribal treaty rights, and all the way up to modern times with Roger Jourdain, you see sitting down there, the old chief, Red Lake, for 31 years. It needed to be somebody who was impartial. I could have wrote it, but it would have been written by things that I feel are relevant to my tribe. Our archivist at the time, Catherine Jody Bolio, could have wrote it, but she probably would have had a different set of preferences. Brenda Child, the great author, she could have wrote it, but then again, she might have had a different take. So let's get somebody who's not really partial to anybody, who could just cover the entire thing and not really have a direct stake. But one of the things he did include in the book, I know that was really special to him, was an elder on our reservation. Her name was Lossavik Anna Gibbs. And she was the highest ranking female Meday priest on our reservation, who was suddenly thrust into that position because all of the older men on the reservation passed away. And they needed to keep our traditional Indian ceremonies going. So she was the person who was the highest ranking, and rather than just let everything just go away, she assumed that not by her own choice, but just how the Creator wanted it. So for several years she was heading up our, and she was a mentor to Tony Troyer, so he loved her to death, so he said, I want to put something about Hannah. I said, go for it. You know, just she had a lot of good teachings and passed on a lot of good things for our people. So there's Tony wrote Warrior Nation, and this was to tell our story in terms of this was more like about leadership, you know, and this was supposed to be the one of many volumes to come. So we're waiting for Warrior Nation 2. And I don't know, he has a website in Historical Society, I think, and you can find these BSU, wherever, all over the place if you're interested. And so, I'll see what I can do with this. You probably won't go through all of this. But this is Patrick DeJarly. He's one of our most notable artists. And he did this big billboard for Red Lake. And it has our 7 clans. The reason why there's 7 clans, there are many more Ojibwe clans. But the reason why Red Lake uses 7 is because when we were negotiating our agreements and treaties with the United States government, those were the 7 big families that were around the area at that time. There were other clans, and there still are to this day, but he has the Makwa, he has the turtle and bullhead, marten, the eagle, otter, and the kingfisher right there. And in this particular it's called Council of Clans. You see the eagle is speaking, and everybody's there to receive a message from Bemidji that they're supposed to relay to the people. And he leaves it open for interpretation. What message do you think he's bringing to the nationality? Really nice to see this back, because these are old teachings that you see that are pretty common now throughout schools and conferences, programs. And Minnewamat even just means good life. And these are the 7 grandfather teachings. You see those more and more surfacing amongst nationality people. This is Johnson Loud Sr. He's an artist who was commissioned to do the Red Lake Nation logo. And the Red Lake Nation logo, of course, it has the circle, the red circle of life that we all follow. It's never ending, it's perpetual. The 7 Red Lake clans, of course, the trees that provide strength, warmth, and sustenance for our people. The lakes, there's 4 stars here. There are 4 communities here. This is Obashing, Panema, which is the farthest remote community. And there's more language speakers here, because they were the most remote and they didn't have the boarding schools and all that there. Red Bee, this is where Red Lake Fisheries is located. Red Lake, which is pretty much the largest community, and then Little Rock is the furthest west. So this is where the Indians set up. There's people who live all over. And so it's all spread out, but Johnson Powell is one who did that. There's the Red Lake Nation flag. And like I said, we span from Michigan, Southern Ontario, Montana. We're one of 7 Ojibwe tribes. So Bemidji is central hub for the 3 big ones, White Earth, Leech Lake, and Red Lake, which is located just 35 miles. So although our land base shrunk with these treaties and these agreements that took place, we do maintain a pretty good chunk. And the only other one that has the status as a closed reservation is the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Oregon. When you say closed reservation, that doesn't mean, oh, no one's welcome here. That's lawless Mexico. You go across that line, something bad's going to happen. All it means is that it's never been occupied or owned by the United States of America. And the state of Minnesota has never had jurisdictional powers there. So there's no state laws there. There's everything is. We have an exclusive federal Indian relationship per our treaties and our agreements. So, and that affords a level of access that a lot of, it befuddles a lot of people. They say, well, I've been on a city council, or I've been the governor, and I've been all of these, but in my whole career, I've never been to the White House and sat with the president and discussed issues, about, but tribal leaders do. The picture over there, you see a bunch of people over there with Nancy Pelosi, and those are tribal leaders from all over the United States who met with President Obama at a Tribal Nations gathering in his first year in office. So he said, if I make it to office, you will come to the White House and meet directly with me. You won't have to meet with a staffer, or you won't have to have somebody come out and, blow you off and send you down the road. So that's the reason why those treaties, to this day, they are the legal law of the land per the United States Constitution. So that's the reason why they have to be honored. So everybody's welcome at Red Lake. We have right now about 17,000. They had this blood enrollment thing last year that bumped everybody up. We have about 4,000 band members that live in and around Minneapolis, St. Paul, and which is huge. A lot of them from termination relocation efforts back in the 50s. They moved to big cities like Denver and Chicago, and Minneapolis was a hub, LA. And so we have a lot of band members there. We go back and forth a lot. We have 836,000 acres left of once was territories that spanned into Dakotas all the way up into Canada. So a massive land base here that the Red Lake people at one time possessed, but now we don't have nearly as much. 60% of all federal Indian trust land in the Midwest is Red Lake. And our land and natural resources are held in common. So when we were dealing with the federal government, we said we don't want a lot and we don't want to be broke up. We want to stay together. And we can't really fathom the thought of owning, what you guys want. You want money and you want all of this. We just want to be left alone. And we want to fish, we want to hunt, and we want to raise our children, and without the threat of anybody coming and killing us. And that will be better if we're all together. And so the federal government, with Red Lake, one of the things our saving grace also is that it was not an agricultural area. And for people who find value in the earth, as far as, it goes all the way back to European history. John Law, the coin. If the coin, even people who grew things, say beets and potatoes, if my neighbor has just as many potatoes as me, and they're going to rot like in a week or 2 weeks or a month or so, there's no value in that. But we have to find a system where there is value. So after the coin, you could amass the actual wealth. Whereas before, you couldn't do that. You had to sell your goods, and you had to do it quickly, or eat it, or do something with it. So that thought of amassing, it was foreign to us, because when we start to learn more about the doctrine of discovery, that was even more mind-blowing, because we were like, well, the Creator put us here. 1863, there was a man out during the negotiations. His name was Assiniwat. That means Little Rock. And when he was speaking to the federal government, he said, the Creator put us here, gifted us with all of this beautiful area here. And just like he gifted you with a beautiful area over there across the ocean, same thing. And we have guardians in all directions. They sit there and they watch us and they help us. So we can't decide on this by ourselves. We can't really understand what it is that you're saying, but we'll get back to you basically. So what they were talking about was this way of life here. Because it was not something that they could really fathom. Money, dollars, the land, everything. So in Red Lake, if you look at us, we're a wetland basically. We have a scarcity of, like, say, where you can put modern infrastructure, water, sewer, dry land. So we have this beautiful body of water, magnificent. And it's potted all over with like little lakes and wetlands and stuff like that. To Europeans, that was worthless. I was like, man, the Indians have that. We can't farm it, we can't make money, it's really no big deal. Yeah, there's a few animals up there. They got the water, but we'll get some of that too. So the upper 1/3 of the upper lake, where Washcase area is located, was taken by the Red Lake people illegally. And that is a series of contention, and it's never been resolved. And it's something that Red Lake talks about also in Warrior Nation. And to this day, the leadership and the elders and the people say, one day we're going to get that lake back. We will. We just need to figure out how. At one point, they almost had it back. Again, it talks about that. But they got the upper 1/3, and so it got chopped off a little portion of it. In our treaty negotiations, that we never agreed to that, but it happened anyway. But we control 100% of our land base at this point. So this is a northwest angle, and that's up in the very top point of Canada. And we have lands up there about probably 85% of the northwest angle. We maintain this stuff. You got to go through War Road into Canada, go all the way around, then you enter back into the stateside, and then it's Red Lake land. But very few people. 2-3 resorts up there. We have wild rice, there's animals, there's medicines, but we don't have nearly enough presence up there. But we reserve those. And we have casinos. Red Lake is not a big, rich casino tribe. People think, oh, a casino, they get all this money, and how come they don't go ask the casino? You get letters from all over, people want money, they think you have all of this money. But Red Lake doesn't. We have 3 casinos, one in Thief River, one right in Red Lake proper, and the other one in Warren up there. And those are pieces of land that Red Lake maintained by treaty. Or later on they discovered, I think back in the 80s, there was a lot of trespass in Indian country. People going on to Indian lands, they were taking animals, driving into areas they weren't supposed to be. And so the tribe said, we want the Department of Interior to release a list of all land holdings. And because we want to know exactly where all of our lands are. So once they issued all of this listing, tribes started finding out, oh man, we have land here, there, we didn't. That's how the Thief River Casino came to be. They said, oh, there's a little piece of in federal Indian trust land, no state jurisdiction on it. So because gaming is federal and it's regulated by the federal government, we're able to build a little casino on a little bitty tiny piece of land out there. So, but we break even. We don't make anything like the big Pequots or California or Washington tribes or Shakopee, Mystic Lake, none of them. It provides some jobs. I think we have about 900 employees at our 3 casinos. That's information. This is people. This is people doing it the old way. canoe and poling and gathering the gnomon. Some the First Nations of Canada use airboats. So they'll, flat John boat will go over the rice and it'll fall into the scooper right here. See all that wild rice there? It's really efficient. It doesn't really damage the rice or any the stalks, but that's cheating.
Yeah.
Because we don't do it that way, we do it the old way like that.
Yeah, what's up?
Which is a lot of work, but it's also a TLC, you know? It's a lot of work to get the rice. We're not as fortunate as my brother back there from Whiter. They have a lot of wild rice, good rice. Ned Lake, Leech Lake has a good lot of rice. In Red Lake, we don't have a lot of rice lakes. We have some. So here you see some of the older people are harvesting because some of the younger ones, either they're too into their computer or their Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, and just trying to teach the younger ones and get them out there at a younger age to learn, have a greater respect for the lands. It's getting tougher, but it's coming back. I'm starting to see more and more, which is good. You see a young boy over there, he's fishing. So someone's taking him out there and teaching him how. That's a good thing. Some of these slides are, see, here's some of the wild rice. And the reason why I share these too is when we move this way, this is what is important to us. We have a relationship with the land. It meant more to us than, you know, even when you take a little, like this here, this is fake rabbit, by the way. I didn't kill this here. Even when you take a little, like some tea or medicine, you say, oh, bonjour, we do caution. Oh, thank you. And you're asking them as, hey, can you help me, please? Thank you. And you drink it. So you're talking to the rice. The deer, when you see him, his life, he's leaving, and then you're thanking him. You know, oh, thank you. I can feed my family, you know, and I won't waste anything. So those are the teachings that our people had for a long, long time. You see hunting camps now and culture camps and stuff and language camps. That's a good thing because we're trying to bring that back. You see, that's the circle of life right here. Never ends. Child into adult, who then becomes respected elder, and that cycle begins all over again. This young girl, her name is Jourdain. They just buried her today. She's 54 or 53 years old. So this old lady, her name was, they called her Mom. She raised this little girl until she passed away. Then now she's a grandma. But yeah, she's just really something that I do this presentation. I was just at her funeral services. So here's our treaties and agreements. Here's an aerial shot. This is Lower Red Lake right here. And remember I was telling you about all of the, see all the water? Little lakes, ponds, wetlands, all around here. That was not of any value to anybody but us, because all of it is valuable. So we had our 1700s, the Ojibwe, 1863 Old Crossing, 11 million acres for $510,000. 11 million acres. Another 3.2 in 1889 in exchange for promises of education, healthcare, agricultural, and money, of course. We rejected that and we stayed with our communal structure. 1/3, and then another 256,000 in 1902. So this is Migazane's. His name is Dan King. He's the college president at Red Lake now. He's a former councilman, but he is a direct descendant of one of the chiefs who negotiated the 1889 agreement and ceded 3.2 million acres. So over time, we've kept our chief, even though it's not as to the T as it used to be. It's almost more symbolic now. But we do that because we don't want our people to forget where we came from. And we want them to uphold the wishes of those old people, and what they did for us. So there's a measure a couple of years ago about alcohol, and it failed. 20 years ago, it failed. People didn't want alcohol. The old chiefs who negotiated those agreements, they said, no, we never want alcohol on our lands. We see it's too devastating to our people. We see what it does. And so in recent years, tribal governing body said, whatever. It's going to increase our bottom line and we'll be able to sell alcohol at our casinos. So we respect the traditions and the treaties, but I make a motion that we pass alcohol, and we passed alcohol. So you see, some people say, what's a modern time now? And we need to get with the times. Times change. But then there's others who say, that's pretty disrespectful to the people who negotiated your treaties and agreements. We need to uphold those treaties to the letter, because our people are the ones who told the government they didn't want this. So, to each his own, pros and cons both ways. But that is per treaty. So if we expect the federal government to uphold the treaty rights, then the Anishinaabe should uphold them too. That's my thought. This is Musqueam. He deceased about a year now. His name is Eugene Stillday. Beautiful man, Ojibwe speaker. He was a Korean War veteran, and he talked about when he was just a small child. They would make him go over, they'd say, come on, we're going to go listen to this old man talk. And he said, I didn't know what we were going over there for. We're young kids, and this old guy would be talking all in Indian. They wouldn't talk English. And he would tell these stories, and it must have been that time of the year where they bring the children and they listen to the elders speak, and probably in the winter months. And they would talk, and he said, I heard this old man talk about this little bitty, tiny blue ball in a vast ocean of others. He said, and we were just a little bitty, tiny island in a vast ocean of other islands. To me, as a kid, I wanted to go play, and can we get out of here, just being a kid. Many, many years later, he said, I was in the Korean conflict on a ship in the middle of the sea near Japan, lonesome for home, for Obashi. And he said, I used to think about my home every now and then, and I was out on the deck and it's night. He said, if you ever want to see the universe and all of its spectacle, just beautiful. He said, it's in the middle of the ocean on a ship. So there I am, I'm looking up, and it just hit me. This is what they were talking about. As far as you could see, nothing but stars. Brilliant, just like they were speaking to one another. And I really got lonesome for home. He said, that's what they were talking about. That's the ocean up there. They're just one of those little. And how they related that is when they would tell these stories, they would talk about the life, the circle, and what role we play in our relationship, and how even as tiny, as significant as we are important in the grand scheme of all things. And the reason why he was telling me this is that we were having a discussion about young people. There was a rash of suicide on the reservation, particularly amongst young girls. And I was asking him, I said, well, how come they're doing that? What can we do? You go to your elders and you ask, what can we do? How can we stop this? And how can we play our part in helping our younger people? He said, a lot of those teachings, when we were young, we grew up, we never even thought of anything like that. Yeah, every now and then something would happen and it was a big news in the community, but we never thought of doing anything like that because we received those stories and those teachings. And I never even really thought about it. He said, but later on, now we start to see a little bit more of a boy or a girl, they have a breakup, and they think that everything's going to end, And if they only had these teachings, he said, I think they would probably rethink some of those things. Very knowledgeable man. He's a good mentor. See him here, he's doing the dedication of these beautiful new buildings back here at Tribal College. And this is the closed reservation sign. This used to be on Red Lake land several years ago. Warning! This is Indian land. No trespassing. You know, people, oh my God, I don't want to go there. You know, and I think they were sending a message that you're on Indian land now. Act accordingly. When we go to Minnesota land, we follow the laws, we pay the taxes, we pay the fines, we have to behave, and we're respectful. So all we ask is that when you come to our nation now, where your laws don't apply, we ask you to acknowledge our ways and respect our people. So it was because of a lot of those instances that were happening in Indian country. And also the stigma, you know, Hollywood portrayals of Indians as, you know, being mean and, you know, all that stuff. So no state laws. We do have a, one of the things that the federal government did with tribes, per treaties, they said, you can determine your own membership. We're not going to tell you who can be a member of your own nation. That's up to you. Because you are a government. You were a government before we came. We can't tell you who's going to be part of your tribe. And so what Red Lake does, if someone is on the tribe, we can't take a person and charge them. Like say a white guy or a black guy or a Mexican guy or whoever, or a lady, commits a crime on the reservation. The tribes are helpless to prosecute that person. But because they can determine their own membership, then they have exclusive say over their own territories, it means that they can eject that person from Indian country. So they will generally contact an outside jurisdiction and say, we have a person here who's no longer welcome on our tribal lands and they're following our laws, totally disrespectful, they're in and out of jail, or they just kind of, you know, thumb their nose at authority. They have no respect. We caught them killing bears or whatever. Then they will take that person and show them to the edge of the Indian land and say, don't come back. We'll catch you here again, it'll be worse next time. Sometimes they sneak back. You know, maybe they have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever. But generally they leave and they don't come back. So they've been petitioning to Congress and to leadership at Washington, D.C. You know, we need to be able to hold people accountable who come into Indian country and commit these acts. We have a Major Crimes Act where federal law applies to just a handful of like murder, rape, robbery, you know, conspiracy, all of these different more serious crimes. But the civil crimes are left to the tribe. But if someone comes on the reservation, commits a crime who's a non-Indian, Indians are helpless to do anything about it. So that was the part of treaties that was not fair, because the tribes, well, we'll give you, we'll let you, well, see, they never gave tribes anything. Tribes reserved. Generally, when you enter into treaties, you come out with less than favorable terms. But that was one that is still to this day, people, you know, they want to keep our people safe and our laws intact. So I don't know if it's really pertinent here. This is more government stuff, but social problems and gaming, we talked about that. I know Maudzewin means good life. This young man here, he ran all the way to St. Paul to invite the governor to Red Lake for a powwow. He was a gifted athlete. His name was Henry Stretch Sumner. He was one of our basketball players, and he played all kinds of sports, and he was a goofy guy. He had a good sense of humor. He was well liked, and then he was a phenomenal athlete. So he took off one day, and he said, well, I'm going to go to St. Paul to invite the governor. He had a letter from the tribal government. I'm going to run down there, and I'm going to go invite the governor. So they had a big send-off for him, and I think the Pioneer did a story on it, and pretty cool. So he took off. First day, he ran 35 miles. He went from Red Lake to Bemidji. Next day, Bemidji to Itasca, Itasca to Park Rapids to Wadena. He must have got tired here because he only ran 18 miles that day. So then he's, I think, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Every day, towards the end, he's running 30, 32, 28, 23. And on his short day at the end, he went from Crystal, just outside the cities, and he ran to the capital for a total of 287 miles. And the governor didn't come. So, but it was a show that we are good neighbors. We value our relationships with surrounding communities. We honor our governmental relations with the state of Minnesota, with the federal government, and just because we have sovereignty and we fiercely protect our sovereignty, and we have things like closed reservations and those type of things, it doesn't mean we're not good people. So that stigma, a lot of that, like even coming to Thief River or to Red Lake Falls under the guise of a peace treaty, even though you're not even at war with these Indians, then you go there and they say, well, what do we really want? Well, it's not really a peace treaty. We want the ox carts to be able to come through here unmolested. Is it okay if we have people coming through your tribal territories? And they were like, oh, well, that's all you guys want? Yeah, we can make that happen. And then, you know, the negotiations go on. Then next thing you know, oh, well, we want 11 million acres is what we really want. And if you don't give us that 11 million, remember those Dakota Sioux there 6 months ago? You know, there's a possibility of that maybe happening. So you see how a lot of this came to play. Even with that, Red Lake has a good relationship with it. Yes?
What year was the runner do? Did he do that?
I think that was like in 1967 or something like that. Yeah. Should run, duplicate his. I'd probably make it halfway down 89 and come and get me, guys. So this is solvent gill netting at Red Lake, which no longer exists. The fisheries does do some gill netting, but this was introduced to the state of Minnesota as a war relief effort in the 20s. Our tribal fisheries went for 80 years, and they used these 300-foot gill nets that basically took anything that swam into them. And in the 90s, there was a major collapse of the fishing industry due to gill netting, which took 80 years. And then the tribe declared a moratorium, working, again, using sovereignty in a positive sense, working with the Department of Natural Resources, State of Minnesota, the BIA. Even Boy Sport Band brought some fingerlings, and we were able to restock. And you know, Kevin Lisi over there he says take credit for oh yeah, those are our fish that we restocked with. But you back up a few years, you'll find out that Red Lake actually gave some fry to them too. So you can't really lay claim. It's a creator's fish. So anyway, fishing was a big deal, and we don't have it anymore. But it was part of our. Couple quick things about Red Lake. You see the Red Lake license plates around. First in the Indian country to have tribal plates. And you talk about sovereignty. That's the old Chief Roger Jourdain. He's legendary for walking the halls of Congress in St. Paul, and he was instrumental in creating the Minnesota State Indian Scholarship. Battles with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, pushing for Indian self-determination. And so one of the things was the Red Lake license plate. And they said, well, we would like to start our own licensing division. And so they talked amongst themselves. They said, what good is sovereignty if you don't use it? And for good things. And we'd like to have our own license plate at Red Lake. And so they started a license, and the state of Minnesota got wind of it, and they said, no, you don't. Any Indian comes off that reservation, they're going to be arrested immediately. Because those license plates are illegal. and the state of Minnesota will not recognize them. So Red Lake, being Red Lake, we were here before there was ever even a Minnesota, and the state can't tell us what to do. You know, we'll have license plates, we'll have license plates. So we didn't want to be confined to the reservation. Naturally, litigation pursued, big dealings in the courts, and the court ruled in favor of the Red Lake ban. They said Minnesota can't go over to Ontario and tell them they can't have license plates. North Dakota can't come to Minnesota and tell Minnesota, how dare you. If you come into North Dakota, every Minnesotan is going to be arrested. You know, they're different sovereigns and governmental structures with their own laws and their own ways. And so Red Lake started issuing license plates to band members. And then state of Minnesota said, well, okay, well, if you guys are going to use the license plates, we should probably work something out and come to some sort of agreement. And Red Lake said, yeah, well, we were all about that from the beginning. We're not saying we're trying to disrespect anybody. We just want to exercise our tribal sovereignty. So cooperatively then, after this court stuff, Minnesota and Red Lake came to an agreement where the license plates became a reality. And other tribes said, what? How come they got license plates? And Red Lake said, well, you can have them too. You know? In fact, we hope you will follow suit. You should have your own license plates too, because you have the right to do that. So no matter where you go in Indian country, you see a tribal plate, that guy and his council and the leadership up there got the ball rolling. Gnu Guanayash, that means eagle soaring around in spiritual wings. Eagle up there. That's his Indian name. Roger Jourdain. I think they even have a name, a day, and Audrey, our councilwoman here, you know, they honor Roger Jourdain once a year, correct? Mm-hmm. And just like about 2 months ago or so?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
I did. I've always been curious about Chippewa, about why that word instead of like Ojibwe or something else. Because isn't Chippewa like a breakdown of, like it's a...
That's the federally recognized term for Ojibwe.
Okay.
So it's there's different variations of Ojibwe. You hear Chippewa, Chippewa. There was then Chippewa. I suppose they had to have some uniform, federally recognized definition. So I don't know how they arrived at Chippewa, but the Ojibwe is that's what we are. That's our tribe, Ojibwe. Our language is Ojibwe Moan, you know, our own native tongue. So, like if you're talking Ojibwe, kita Ojibwe mana? You know, that's you talk Indian. Bangi tago. So they're like a little bit, but they don't say kita Chippewa na. That's Ojibwe. So the tribes, some of them changed their constitution. Some of them said, you know, that doesn't really reflect who we are. Traditionally, we're Ojibwe. So we're going to change from Chippewa to Ojibwe. So, you know, it might be the White Earth Ojibwe Nation or the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. You know, they didn't recognize themselves as Chippewa anymore. But then you got some of the Indians who are kind of stuck in their ways too. You know, oh no, it's Chippewa and that's the way it is and we're not going to change it, you know, but you know, that's just the way they grew up and they understood it. Nothing bad, it's just that over time, people change. And I think some of the ones coming up are saying, well, we're not Chippewa, we're Ojibwe, you know, and so we should probably recognize our own original language and our identity. But that's at Red Lake, we're still called the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians, because we're federally recognized that way. Over time, we also call ourselves the Red Lake Nation. And some people even say Red Lake Nation Ojibwe. So it's, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
Here's one of the lakes, 1974 was the ordinance. This is a passport. And these are our treaty territories. That's 1863. You can see the Red Lake and Pembina. The Pembina Indians, they went west. So those are our relatives out there, Turtle Mountain, Rocky Boy, Cree, Chippewa Cree. You know, they at one point were in this area here. And then after this treaty here, they went west. Some of them didn't want to go west, so they came back to Red Lake. They said, well, we don't want to go here. We like it around here, so we're going to stay. At one point, Red Lake was even considering issuing passports because of, again, the violation of tribal customs, trespassing on Indian land. And they said, we are a tribal sovereign. We have the right to regulate our own membership. And so people coming onto the reservation, you know, and they were considering a customs, just like when you go into Ontario. And this was under Roger. It never did materialize. Like, there was a number of other events that happened in the 70s that kind of put that on the back burner. Particularly in 1979, we had a overthrow, basically, a kind of like an insurrection type thing. It was called a takeover in Red Lake. You see these people storming the Capitol. We had something similar at Red Lake in 1979 where there was government upheaval. So if your political stability is under threat, you're probably like, that passport thing, heck with that. You know, let's deal with the matters at hand. So a lot of things were put off, and so it never did really materialize. There's the passport back. As a guest of the Red Lake Band, I visit our Aboriginal lands, Lake Chippewa. And so how are we doing for time, Pete?
About an hour, a little over an hour.
Just about an hour?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to put you guys off to sleep. This man, his name is Jourdain, Peter Graves. He is also in Warrior Nation. There's a chapter that is dedicated to him, also a chapter on Roger in his era. Peter Graves, he was a huge proponent of education, learning about the government, working with the government. And he had critics because people said, well, he's so in with the government that, you know, we don't really trust him. But he said, I don't apologize for that. You know, we have a duty to learn everything we can about the federal government, about the state governments, and we have to educate ourselves in that, and that's not even good enough. We have to make sure that all of our people are educated in that. Because if we don't have people who are well-versed in treaties and government, in the Constitution, those kind of things, then we'll get overrun again. And we can never let that happen. So he said, every boy and girl, man, woman, child should be educated. And that was his mantra, was that we need to have that. And so he was the leader of the Red Lake Reservation for even longer than Roger. But they were structured differently. They had two officers, a secretary treasurer and a chairman, and you had the 7 chiefs, and every chief could have 5 advisors. So there's 7 people sitting right here. Let's say you all are the leadership here, this whole area here. You could find 5 people that you trusted, you felt had the characteristics of leadership, who had good thinking and analytical something to contribute. So all of you would have 5 advisors. And then when you went to council, they would all come with you. If you could get them all there. You know, sometimes it was like, there's this guy here. You know, they were real strict because if you didn't come, you know, you could miss like 3 meetings. If you didn't show up, they'd throw you off and get somebody else. But most of the people they picked were pretty good. And so the 7 chiefs had 5 advisors. Then you had the 2 officers. And the chiefs were the ones who appointed the chairman and the secretary treasurer. So you guys would appoint.
When did Joseph Graves serve?
Who?
When did he serve?
He was the first one, 1918.
He's the very first one.
Yep, this constitution you see here was 1918 was when they first.
Okay, so he was the first, and
Yeah.
then it was Roger after that, right?
over 40 years later. This one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, after Peter Graves passed away. So this is Peter Graves' Jourdain. And in 1950, the Minnesota Historical Society did an interview with Peter Graves. And in his story, he said his parents intersected. His dad was escaping the rebellion up in Canada, and his mother was from the Leech Lake Reservation. And she came to Red Lake. She was a seamstress, and she was pen pals with this old lady in Boston, Massachusetts, who had the last name Graves. They would write letters back and forth all the time. So they met Peter's dad. His name was Jourdain. He came from Canada, and he met Peter's mother in Red Lake, and then that's how Peter was born. He didn't even have an English name. His name was Jourdain. So people now, when they say Jourdain, they think that means English. For us first speakers and Ojibwe speakers, they say Jourdain Moen. You're going to talk in white man's language now. You're going to talk English. But according to Peter Graves, he said, what my name means, Jourdain, they're describing the British. Because if you recall, the Ojibwe were instrumental in the French and Indian War. Some of them sided with the British, some sided with the French. And there was a time when the British would attack, they would attack Ojibwe communities and encampments. And just like any other war, strategic, they would arrive early when everybody's sleeping, and they had horses. And so they would say they would come so fast, they'd surprise everybody. Jourdain, he said that means blown with the wind. So if you see something like, what are those things that blow across the desert?
Tumbleweeds?
A what?
Tumbleweed?
A tumbleweed. You see something, a leaf, something just come flying by real fast. The wind is carrying it. That's how they describe the British, the soldiers. They come so fast that they're just like, all of a sudden they're there. So Jourdain, that's what that means, blown with the wind. See, the language is so complex. It doesn't mean one thing. It could mean so many things. Like this year, Opwaga, this pipe right here, Opwaga. My uncle, he'd say, Nigadayan, Niji, Opwagas, Nigadayan. And that's, I didn't know what he was talking about. You know, these people were talking, you're not standing there, Tony Indian, you know, like, what are they saying? You know, and then one time I asked him, I said, well, what did you say to him? Oh, and because I seen that guy go like this, oh yeah, hand him a cigarette. And I was like, he was talking Indian, he didn't say nothing. And I was just, gives him a cigarette, trying to put two and two together. And I said, well, what did you say to him, Uncle? Oh, I asked him for a cigarette. I said, so there's a word for cigarette in Ojibwe? Not really. Well, what did you say to him then? He said, well, Wagas, that means little pipe. He said, there is really not a word for cigarette. He said, the only thing the Indians ever smoked was a pipe. And that's not a big pipe. It's a little pipe. And I was like, oh, okay. So, hey friend, Opwagas Nigadayan, Niji. Niji means friend. So, hey my friend, can I have one of your little pipes? And so he goes, here. So if you think about it, when people break the language down like that, it's just like, a lot gets lost in translation. So anyway, Jourdain, that's his story. He was on reservation at a time when there was a lot of boarding schools back then. There was government officials on the reservation. There was floating of timber over the lakes. There was a lot of logging going on the reservation. And I think what happened here in Panema is that the reason why this community is so remote, they were sort of leery of what was going on in the southern part of the lake. They didn't like it that all this activity was going on. So they secluded, a lot of times they secluded themselves. We don't want to go over there. There's too many white people over there, you know, and they have all these government people and all this. And so there was a mistrust that happened there between the Indians on the southern part of the lake and the ones up north. Some of that even exists today still. But Peter Graves was a pretty fascinating man and advanced our tribe, and at the same time kept it closed. So as we wind down, this pertains to our 1889 agreement. It was called the Relief and Civilization of the Red Lake Indians. So it was, they wanted the 3.2 million, but it was under the guise of, well, we need to basically civilize everybody. You see, these are the children at Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where they say the little girls, they all look like little dolls, and the boys all got their haircut, they're all the same. And so this happened every Indian reservation and every Indian community, including Red Lake. There was boarding schools there too as well. Now we have the, what a lot of Indians knew all along is that a lot of our children were lost to these boarding schools, and a lot of them never came home. Now they're finding thousands of our Indigenous children, you know, where they met very grave fates, bodies discovered and burial, unmarked graves, and so there's and this has been going on for a long time in First Nations of Canada. They're actually more advanced in a lot of those issues than we are, but now it's starting to hit stateside now. And people are starting to say, well, it's something that we were afraid to actually bring up, or no one was listening to us. Now we need to say something. So the boarding school there, I think we could spend a whole week on that. So this is a St. Mary's Mission at Red Lake. This is a little history of the Red Lake Mission School and residential schools. And the 1936 Minnesota took over Indian education in Minnesota under contract with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we started to establish our public school system there. In 1940, this old boarding school was burned down to the ground, was replaced by modern schools. 1950, the BIA funded a school at Red Lake. 53, new elementary school in FEMA, Department of Education. In 55, the state of Minnesota received a quitclaim deed building a new high school at Red Lake. And so 20 acres were deeded to the state. See, there's no state jurisdiction there. So the tribe said, okay, if you educate the children, we will issue a deed. And as long as it's being used for educational purposes, you can occupy it. But underneath, it's Red Lake land. So the state of Minnesota then could have a school district there. So they have their independent board of education. They are band members, but they all fall under the rules of the Minnesota State High School League. So that's how Red Lake Schools, public schools, is able to operate. There's another school coming up, charter school coming up soon. That's the Red Lake Elementary School, Red Lake Panema Elementary. There's the Red Lake High School, and this is some information that some of the college students requested. Some education on decolonize and indigenize. So medicine wheel, this is pretty standard teaching in a lot of our communities now. This is a new, over at the elementary school, a new section that they put on. The seven grandfather teachings on all of these columns, and then the medicine wheel up there.
And elementary is like a turtle, isn't it?
No.
What school is that?
No turtle buildings in Red Lake. We have two big eagle buildings, but no turtle. And this here, of course, is Charles Darwin. And this is a relationship with, I did this experiment with a youth council once. It shows these embryos. They all have an eye and a tail, and they all have these little appendages. And then, so I handed out the second one. You can see they're starting to actually take shape now. And then the third one, you actually see a fish, a salamander, a tortoise, a chick, a rabbit, and a human. So they're going from the embryonic stage all the way to fully developed.
Bob, where was the boarding school? You said 1940 it burned, the boarding school, or where was it located?
There was one There was a boarding school in Panema, and then there was one in Red Lake, and then at first they were residential. Then they went to day schools,
Okay.
and then you had sisters and brothers and all that kind of stuff. A Catholic church, a Diocese of Crookston is the one that oversaw them along with the BIA. And then over time, now the St. Mary's Mission School, there's still students there, but they don't have like agricultural buildings and sisters and nuns and fathers. They have a priest who lives there, and then it's basically the educational purposes now.
So the one that was in Abashing, would that have been residential, like you said, first, and then?
Yeah,
They didn't, so they went residential and then day school, and moved to day school.
yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, they just went to day school after a while because people didn't want to stay there. You
Yeah.
know? That's one of the reasons why federal policy over time, they said, well, we can't keep the Indian children near their families.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want to go to school, they run away, and there's too many families there. We need to detach them from their community and send them off to Indian schools. So some of them went away and never came back. This is Eddie Ben Benet in Mishoma's book. And so some of us, did you go to Heart of the Earth?
No, I went to
Red Schoolhouse?
yeah.
Yep, Red Schoolhouse. Well, see, I went to Heart of the Earth first. And then I ended up getting beat up there, so they sent me over to Red Schoolhouse. And the reason why they beat me up is because I had the kind of face that people just like to punch, you know? No, there was a couple guys that, were kind of giving me a hard time. I went there for about 2-3 days. And I said, I don't know if I like it here, Dad, man. I said, these guys are not letting up. It doesn't seem like it. Well, they got to school in Red Schoolhouse in St. Paul. You can go there. So I went there. And then Jamie and I and there's so many people over the years that went on to do a lot of good things, and live good lives. And some of us traveled the Powell Arena, and some of them became ceremony people. Others got into government. And one of the things I liked about the survival schools is that they said, we're going to teach you about your history. We're going to teach you treaties, and we're going to teach you the social fabric of America and European history. But we teach you all of these things. We do not want you to make excuses or not succeeding. Use this knowledge in a good way. Don't become professional victims. Use this knowledge to make change. Act. Get out there. Fight for our people. So that's what I really liked about the survival schools. The American Indian Movement, and you had the Center School, Red Schoolhouse, and the Heart of the Earth School in Minneapolis. They all had the same type of teachings, incorporated in also with the, arithmetic, science, math, biology, all of that. But I went to the city. That's the first time I ever saw a pipe ceremony. In the city, it was the first time I ever experienced a language class. That's the first time I ever sat at a drum. Back home on the reservation where I was from, we didn't see stuff like that. Because Red Lake is considered a closed reservation, and you think that there would be culture everywhere. But we were very much the same as other tribes. We suffered the same assimilation outcomes as everybody else. So when I grew up then in a single parent household, at age 11, my mother raised 7 of us. I didn't have role models that took me to sweats or we didn't see a lot of that. When I went to Minneapolis and St. Paul, they were really, really trying a concentrated effort to bring those teachings back to Indian country. And I really liked that, so when I came back to the reservation, I took an interest in that, and then I found out, well, hey, there was language here. There was those kind of things. I just never saw it before. I never paid attention. I was want to smoke dope and, hang around and play basketball, which is all, good things to everybody. But I had to, go a different path with my life because I didn't want to become another statistic. And those are the things that we learned too, is that you don't want to become another statistic. Do something with your life, and do what you can to help people. So those are the teachings of that Jamie and I received and others at the Red Schoolhouse and other places. I'd seen on the program it talked about the roots at Red Schoolhouse. So the revitalization. This is a kid at Red Schoolhouse. Is that you? Sitting there studying. And you can see the drum head sitting up there. I think that drum head cracked or something, so they couldn't use it anymore, so they use it as a wall hanging. It's pretty cool. So this is Warrior Nation, that's Swasabik, Anna Gibbs, Tony Troyer, and they're doing language studies right here. And that's the book Warrior Nation. So there's the Red Lake Nation College, and that's what it looks like today. And these are some of our graduates. There's Patrick, who's a talented artist, who's still doing. There's Welcome to the Warrior Nation. Some of that has been adopted now. I like that the Warrior Nation has been adopted. Here's our clan system. This is our old tribal governing body. An old hospital here. I was born in that building in 1964. This is our advisory 7 chiefs that negotiated our treaties and agreements. I'll probably slaughtered Meganigwanabe, which is leading feather, and Red Road, Praying Day, Little Thunder, Stone Man, and Noon Day. Asiniwap, and it said, man, I was talking about. And this is Red Lake, got a trading post now. Fancy, they got a subway in there even. But look at the 7 clans are located on the building. And so that's just these are 2 elders that, this is Nisquannequit and Tabasanaquit. They're both pertain to the clouds. Red cloud, Nisquannequit, Tabasanaquit. That means when the low-hanging cloud, when the cloud is really low down to the. And he was a very spiritual man, very educated, a brilliant teacher, and this is my uncle Lars Williams. Lars Williams is a Dakota Sioux from Sisseton, South Dakota. And this is my aunt Juliana Williams. She's from Red Lake, Ritchie. And like I said, our tribes, we intermarry and we back and forth. And so I was trying to acknowledge my elders. And in closing, this is Dan and that's David Connor. David Connor is like our self-governance guru at Red Lake. Anything federal Indian, interior, funding, all those kind of things. The tribe went self-governance in the 90s. So where the BIA used to oversee in Indian country, they used to manage all the tribal affairs. It's really a demeaning process. It's like you go to Washington, D.C. every year, you got to grovel and beg. You know, our treaties and our agreements are still pertinent today. But you still got to go to Washington, D.C. every year, and you go to the Department of Interior building, and you sit in a room with bureaucrats, and you go line by line by line, and you negotiate what type of federal money is owed to you as an Indian per our treaties and our agreements. And traditionally, they would say, well, let's see, you weren't good Indians this year. We'll give you half of this because your little brothers over here, they were good. They're getting that. And we're going to give you guys that. I don't know about you guys. So it's like begging. And you should never. 1889, 1863, 11 million acres, 3.2 acres, 257 acres. You know, what we contributed to the United States of America, state of Minnesota, North Dakota, what was sacrificed by our tribal leaders, and how that constant fight has gone on every year since. And so why treaties matter? Why? Peter Graves said every boy, girl, every man, child should know about these treaties. Genu Guanayash, we need to fight for self-determination and uphold our treaties. We need to be present in St. Paul. We need to be present at the nation's capital and represent our people and be a voice for our people. And we need to prepare and foster the development of future leaders as they come up. Because what they talk about now is the water woes. Look at the drought. 30 years ago, I sat with Andy Favorite and Bill May and Mike Myers and Keith Lucier and all these guys at the cafeteria in Red Lake. And they were talking, it was a little treaty meeting. And they said they're going to come after our water. It's only a matter of time before they come after our water. Grand Forks, Fargo has built beyond capacity. Their populations are bursting at the seam. They're looking for every little piece of water. In the 20s, the Army Corps of Engineers turned our beautiful lake into what they call a reservoir. So it's basically a sink. When the Red River Valley is drought, they open the sink up and all the water rushes out. Whenever they have too many floods and everything, they turn the sink off. And then our lakes get big again. Those are issues, treaty rights issues. They're issues that Roger championed, for Indian people. So that's the reason why treaties matter. They're still nation accords, and they still, no pun intended, hold as much water as they did back then. And that's the reason why not only should you talk about federal Indian law and talk about policies and talk about the treaties per se, the legalese of everything, you also need to talk about this, because that's what the Indians understood. They understood that. So Dave is at UMD, he's a student, and he's looking for a job. He's going to be a graduate, and he's like, some guy just told me that Leech Lake is looking for a DNR guy. And he's a young guy, so he calls Jerry's reservation. See, he's got Leech Lake, isn't he? He calls Jerry's reservation and says, hey, I understand you guys are looking for a water biologist. Yeah, we are. Yeah, we'll send you an application. What's your address? So he's a young guy. He's over at UMD at Duluth. So they send him an application. He sends it back. A few weeks later, he gets a notice. They said, well, thank you for applying, but we already got a guy already that we hired, but thank you. We'll keep your name on file. So he was like, I didn't know anything about tribes. He said, I was just gonna, I've seen a posting somewhere about they needed it, and that was what I was educated in. So he said, not long later, about a week later, someone said, Dave, you got a phone call. So he gets this call. Hello? Yeah, this is Joe Johnson, Red Lake. I'm one of the administrators up here. Heard you're looking for a job. Well, yeah. I said, well, we need a guy to work for a DNR biologist. You want to come work at Red Lake? And he said, geez, I don't know. How do I apply? Come on up and see us. He said, well, see what we can do. So he goes to Red Lake, and he walked into the DNR building, and he sat down there. He said, I was like, it's kind of different. And there was an old woman sitting there, and he's sitting there, and he goes, hi. He goes, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm applying for a job here. Oh, okay. And, okay, well, whatever you do, don't look at the women around here. The guys around here, they get pretty mad when you look at the women around here. I said, oh, really? Oh, yeah, and you want to get these guys mad around here. They're real protective of the Indian women here. I was like, oh, okay. That whole day, I sat there for about 2.5 hours. He said, I was sitting there, and the woman walked by. He said, this hello. Wait. He said here later on, I found out that the lady was just joking. He said, I was all scared. He said, I found out about Indian humor. So I got the job. He said, but one of the things I remembered when I was in Duluth, I was walking down the street and I saw this old beat-up army truck. And I was walking by and it said U.S. on the side, and someone took spray paint and then wrote post office next to the U.S. on this old army truck. He was like, these kids or something. He thought it was pretty crazy. And I looked down had a license plate on there. He said, it said Red Lake. He said, and I was like, what kind of plate is that? He said, I just kept going. He said, that was right around the time when I got that call. He said, it's really weird. He said, I see this old beat up truck with a Red Lake plate. Then I get this call from Red Lake. Next thing I know, I'm up there. But one of the things he came to Bemidji to get a haircut. So he came to Bemidji to get a haircut, and he said he was in this barber shop, and this lady said, hey, haven't seen you around here before. And he goes, oh yeah, I'm new. So what do you do? He said, I just got a job. I'm working up in Red Lake. And he said, I kid you not, she dropped her scissors. Like, what? He said, something wrong? You know, what? Oh, no. She dropped her scissors. And he was like, oh, that was kind of weird. So just her reaction was that, oh, you're working up there? And I used to have friends here. I'd go to BSU, and I said, come on up, watch the Vikings, man. Oh, you kidding? I'm not going up there. You know, I said, well, why not? Well, yeah, all right. I'll be welcomed real good. And I said, oh, come on, man, come on up. Introduce you to my cousins, I'll show you on the res, and then also that stigma thing. Dave, he's been there ever since. He was just a young guy. He's still there. He's still working for the tribe. He said, I love it. I love the people. He said, I've always been treated well at Red Lake. He said, I over time, he seen his first dead body at Red Lake. His boss, his name was Lawrence Padu, he got diabetes. There's a huge diabetes problem in Indian country that everybody's aware of. And Lawrence succumbed to his illness over time. He was a councilman. He was a leader of the Little Rock district over there, and he was Dave's boss. And Dave said, I didn't know how to feel. Go to his funeral, his wake. I'd never been to a wake before. And because both of his parents were alive, his grandparents were alive, his siblings, everyone was still alive back then. He said, I'd never lost anybody close to me. And so to go to my boss's wake, to actually walk up to a casket and see a dead body, he said, for me, that was really, really weird. And it's something I really had to force myself to go through it. He said, but then when I found out that this was pretty commonplace in Indian country, he said, just the amount of loss, he said, over time, that's one thing that I've never really been able to really become numb to. So it just so many people I've seen go over the years. But I'm still here, I'm still doing good. So it's Migazaints. It means little eagle. Migazaints is when the bald eagle before their head turns white. So they still got a brown head. And people mistake them for a gold eagle. They say, oh, I saw a golden eagle. Well, golden eagles are pretty rare around bigger Iowa and further south. But when they're big, beautiful brown eagle, that's Migazaints. They're a juvenile. Then their head turns white and their tail turns white. That's Dan King's name, is Migazaints. So he's the hereditary chief. And that's David Connor. So that's why treaties matter. To keep us connected to our roots, to keep us connected to our ancestors, to uphold their wishes, to preserve our land base, to nurture and foster the development of all leaders. And they don't have to be tribal chiefs or tribal leaders. Maybe they're just good parents. Maybe they connect with their clan and they say, well, my clan is Bear Clan, what does that mean? Maybe I should learn more about that. Maybe there's something in my life that I can contribute based on my clan. And I'd like to learn more about my grandpa. I didn't know that my grandpa was one of those 5 that the chief selected. I wish I knew more about that. Maybe I should ask somebody. Or maybe in their life they're struggling. And they're like, well, what do I do? I'm going through this really hard time in my life, and I wish I knew how to get through this. Musqueam, Tabasan, Akwe Sema, all of those teachings there, they help. So that's the reason why people are so insistent on acknowledging the treaties around here. You see all of these images, documents. You see the arrival of Europeans. You see the relations, negotiations. You see the young girl back there with the Monoman. She's doing what our Creator blessed us with, and she's carrying on those traditions. See people in the casinos over there on one of them. We talked about economic development. The young boy carrying on the traditions of fishing that his grandparents and his dad taught him. You see these delegation over your Indian leaders going to the highest office in the land to say, we're still here, we're significant. Remember those treaties we signed into? They're still here, they're still real. We honor them. And we hope that you will honor them too. So that's the reason why Ash fighting for sovereignty. And all the way to the American Indian movement and the survival schools and all of our elders that have done that before us. That's the reason why treaties matter. Language. Thank you.